A lot of our questions have to do with what the ESOL specialist is seeing and feeling that the rest of the special education team, maybe the speech language pathologist, or maybe the administrators as a sort of a school policy, don't want to test a child. You know, how does that ESOL specialist in their own role, his or her own role, then begin to advocate?
It's very important. I go back to my colleague, Teresa Young, and she's a speech language pathologist. We've been collaborating for, you know, like I said, about 17 years. But she talks about her practice when she was in the Toronto District School Board. And, you know, sometimes she would practice exactly that collaboration. She would try to initiate the collaboration because she was very, very respectful and honoring of the fact that she has her expertise in her field, but she knew that these were complex issues and that we needed to have the point of view and the information and the expertise from ESOL teachers, from reading specialists, from general education teachers, from school psychologists. And so I really looked to that model because she really would say, oh, so what do the parents tell us? And you as the ESOL teacher, what are you seeing? And so that she would invite and honor those other perspectives. And she as a special educator I think that was a really great model. So that I'm speaking to our colleagues in special education to really partner with ESOL. And then as ESOL and bilingual educators, that we realize that we have a really important piece of the puzzle. So we are very familiar with the sort of typical trajectory, that's interesting, the developmental progression that English language learners take as they develop their social and their academic English. And we work with students from all different backgrounds, from children from refugee experiences, children who are born in the United States who are English language learners, children with interrupted schooling, from all different language backgrounds. So that is a very big part of the puzzle, and it's important that we find ways to share resources so I'm speaking right now, I'm thinking about the WIDA Consortium. It has really beautiful, the standards and their can-do descriptors that help our colleagues from other disciplines to see very descriptively what is typical or what is the process that children should go through. So when things are not quite working that way, not that we immediately go to special education, but that we say, from this experience and from what we know about what should be happening or the trajectory that the students should take, we do need to support this child because he's doing things quite differently than his peers who are, have had very similar backgrounds. So I think remembering that you have a big piece of the puzzle as an ESOL teacher, and sometimes it means partnering with one other person. So being able to sort of cross over the bridge, my colleague and I talk about that, from your discipline to another discipline and partner with one other person and say, well, this is what I do when the child has, difficulties. What do you do from your perspective? So it could be your colleague who's a speech language pathologist, it could be a reading specialist or a classroom teacher, a school psychologist, but really taking the initiative, even if it's just one other person, to begin that conversation. I think that would be really helpful in that process.
And I think starting small is key. You have an ally because they've seen that there's some success, and sort of building those relationships. We interviewed an itinerant teacher who starts every school year by sending a letter to his colleagues saying, this is who I am and this is what I do. Oh. And he does that because he's in a lot of schools and he knows he's not going to have time to develop relationships. But I think it's a great idea for everybody to sort of start and say, this is what I know how to do. And one specific question that comes to mind is if you hear about a meeting, even maybe just hearsay, like you're not even informed officially, you hear about a meeting about a child who's an English language learner, and there's going to be a discussion of whether this child should be recommended for some kind of referral or testing. And nobody has approached you. You're that child's ESL teacher. What would you say to that teacher in that moment? How do they kind of insert themselves, but not burn bridges, but start to build them a little bit?
So it's already going on. So it's never too late to support that child and provide the other perspective. But so even if the meeting is happening and you're teaching, but you do hear about it, again, try to find that ally or administrator. And again, maybe not in front of other people, but talk with the administrator and say, you know, we're making really high stakes decisions about this child. And I don't think there was anybody in the team that had that ELL lens. So whatever is decided really is partial, because we didn't take the entire child into consideration. And so they are, and so I don't know, the question sometimes comes up is that, you know, ELL or special education. But again, my colleague Teresa and I, we really have been trying to reframe that as they're English language learners. They're always English language learners. I mean, like they're in somewhere in that process of developing their second, third, or, you know, fourth language, and they are having challenges, and they might also have special education needs. So they don't stop being a bilingual learner just because they might have another you know, need or challenge that they might be having. And so it's a great disservice to say, you know, one is more important than the other. That child is living in that, you know, all those worlds at the same time. So I think it really is important to talk with especially administrator, decision maker, or those who lead the teams, and say how important it is. There are obviously legal components to this. There are laws that protect the rights of English language learners who may or may not have special education needs, and on top of that, you know, is really what are we doing that's best for that student. So we do have to inform, because again, you might not be able to be at every one of those meetings, but we need to build capacity across the district so that there always is someone who has that lens at the table.
And it's worth mentioning that ELLs with special needs have a legal right to both sets of services,
both,
right? So sort of building on what you're saying, it's not a choice.
No.
It's not that one is more important than the other, and they should receive both kinds of services, and the school is legally obligated to figure out how to make that happen. Right? I think it's important always to stress that. Ashley is looking for practical strategies for monolingual special education teachers who are working with students in a bilingual setting.
Oh, so they're doing inclusion then. So I'm assuming the special education teacher is working in the bilingual classroom to support the students. Is that?
Or if not in a bilingual classroom, at least in a bilingual school where maybe the teacher, I'm assuming, is an English speaker, but working within a bilingual program model.
Yeah, really. Going back to that collaborative piece, this is very important. The work that's been done on there's research that my colleague and I have been looking at, and it's very interesting because this collaborative piece is so essential. It's not even just like a touchy-feely, you know, feely good, you know, to be working together. It's essential that we collaborate, because again, we have different expertise, and so we don't but the student is sort of in the middle, right? So in that sort of interface, right? They are English language learners or bilingual learners with special education needs, and then we have two professionals who have different expertise. So what's very interesting is even if we're serving the student in these two different settings, or you know, we're fulfilling our minutes and our obligation, unless these two professionals, or the bilingual educator and the special educator, unless they talk to coordinate and make that day cohesive to the student, the bilingual learner with special education needs, their needs will not be met. You know, so we may, on paper, it looks like we're programming appropriately, but just having the conversation and like, what are you working on? What are you working on? Oh, so you have a unit on the solar system. Okay, I'm going to do the therapy or the work that I'm doing. I'm going to use the solar system. Maybe it's vocabulary that they're working on or whatever. I'm going to make sure that it's tightly connected to what you're doing in the classroom. And so that becomes, even if it is in English, using, you know, ESL pedagogy, making sure they're visuals and all those things. But so then when the student is learning something in this setting, it directly connects when they're in the other setting. And we have made those connections for those children who are having challenges. And the other thing is, again, as a bilingual educator, our expertise is not in learning disabilities, right? We don't have the same experience and knowledge that our colleagues in special education have. They have vast, not just from their studies, vast knowledge and experience from their clinical experience, from their working with hundreds of, you know, children with special education needs. So what we need is to have a conversation so they can talk to us about how the sort of characteristics of a particular disability from their experience. And together we can talk about how the difficulty, the disability, the special education need is manifesting in the classroom. So I, as a classroom teacher, if you talk to me about this child is having maybe their difficulties is with auditory comprehension, so understanding the message, whether it's in English or Spanish or Russian, whatever their languages are, that and how that manifests and what it feels like to the student who has that difficulty. As a classroom teacher, I'm going to be able to put in place some strategies. For example, I'll know that when I pose a question, maybe everyone's doing think, pair, share, but I have to also realize that that child who has auditory comprehension difficulties, even if I'm teaching in their own language, they're going to need a little bit more time. They need time to understand the question that's been asked, to formulate the answer, to think about it, to comprehend, and then they can think about what their answer will be. So it's yes, a good practice to do, for example, think, pair, share, and to have, you know, students have that wait time, but understanding that this child has significant difficulties in that particular area is very important that you as the classroom teacher know. So that tightly really connected collaborative relationship is important because it goes two ways. We want to make sure that wherever the student is, both of their needs are being met, and that falls on the responsibility of the adults to, you know, even if you're not co-teaching, but you're in like different situations, you may not be doing that. And even if you don't know the language, value the language and bring it in, have kids, you know, preview things in their home language, you know, with peers or from home, so that when you do your instruction in English, it's more comprehensible. You've given them time to think about what they might be, what they might, their answers are. But again, the collaboration benefits the student in every setting that they're in. So, yeah.
You had mentioned the student's schedule on paper, sort of looking, you know, taking a comprehensive look at what is the student's day. Is it chopped up into lots of tiny pieces with different specialists and adults and services? When we interviewed Nathaniel Provencio a few months ago, he spoke about, we asked him about the best professional development that he had done, and he said it was taking a stopwatch and following a child for a day and seeing how much meaningful instruction the child had. In this case, it was about 15 minutes in the whole day because the kid was moving from so many different places. And so, so I think that idea of saying, let's not just look at this little piece that I'm working on, but let's take a look at this child's schedule as a whole and figure out, are there some other ways that maybe we can strategically group. Also, we've worked at Mason Crest, which is a elementary school in Annandale, Virginia. They have been very creative about how they're a professional learning community, so collaboration is embedded in absolutely every element of the school. They actually use all of their adults to work with whatever children need the support. So the special education teacher may actually have a reading group that includes some ELLs, some native English speakers, and some struggling readers, and some special education students, or not. And it was very hard, as you can imagine, for the specialists who were used to sort of working with their kids, or maybe taking them out and sort of having this focus time to get used to this model. But once they did, it just gave them the flexibility that all the adults were available to help whatever children needed it. And so it's a constant process of reevaluating who's working with what group. Now, clearly that has to be something that comes from every level of, because you need the support, but being really creative about saying how can we look at the schedules and look at the time and look at what students need and to intervene.
That's brilliant. That's because there's so much expertise in our schools, and if we remain kind of in these silos, we're not taking advantage of all the expertise in the school to be able to benefit the students. I think about that. We have social workers who have so much knowledge about social and emotional well-being and wellness that we can, obviously that social worker can't be treating everyone, but if we can collaborate, we can learn from our colleagues and have that flexibility, then the entire school can be aware of those pieces. Or we have speech language pathologists who know so much about language development and how to elicit language and generate language, reading specialists. We have all these colleagues in our buildings. I think that's brilliant to really leverage all those strengths to support the students in a more flexible way. That's wonderful.
Well, we were very intrigued by it as well when we were